Welcome back for another VMK in the game development series. In the previous VMK, we created the GUI Radio class, which we can use to create a grouping of radio buttons. These groupings depend on the GUI button class, so anytime we want to create a radio set, we need to have these GUI buttons already created for us. And then we just use these add button functions so that we can just group everything together into a radio grouping set. So let me show you how to use this radio set inside of a demonstration. We'll go back into our program, and you'll see that from previously here we've created a GUI element with GUI button, which we've populated with some coordinates here to represent the quit button on the main screen. I'm just going to replace this. I'm going to delete this guy actually and show you how you can use the radio button. So I'm going to replace the old code with the following. We're just going to create another button, has some coordinates here. Actually, let me show you what this looks like inside here. So I created GUI.tj, I've modified it slightly, and I added these radio buttons here. Because we have 4 states to work with, I wanted to emphasize all 4 states. If you're not over top of the button and you haven't selected it, you would have this state here with the blue border with nothing on the inside. If you highlight over top of it, you'll have a red border, and then as soon as you press the button, you'll have a little black circle on the inside. And again, depending on whether you're over it or not, you'll have a red circle if you are over it and a blue circle if you're not. So those are the 4 states for the radio buttons. Now going back inside the code, I specify here some pixel coordinates for where those are all located, and we're going to load in the button data and assign appropriate textures to those coordinates there. You've already seen this in the previous VMK where we talked about how to assign textures for a regular button. Now what I'm going to do is just assign this button into our control grouping here so that we can render it onto the screen. And if I compile this, we should be able to have just a standard button on the screen that we can highlight and press. So if I go over top of it, it turns red. If I press on it, it turns with a little black part on the inside. And you notice that even when it's selected, I can still highlight over it and it turns red. And then I can unselect it and it deselects, like so. So now I want to add in the radio button functionality. To do that, what we need to do is we don't actually push this button onto our control stack, like so. We don't want to do this because our GUI radio is going to be responsible for keeping track of that. So we're going to remove this guy and instead do the following. We're going to go past this else statement and define the following. We're going to be using pradio, and pradio I'm going to define at the top here to be a GUI radio pointer. And as soon as we do this, we also need to make sure we go into scene.h and include the appropriate header file. Okay, so now that the compiler knows what a GUI radio item is, we're going to specify the ID number. Let's just say it's going to be radio resolution. We're going to pass in P button, which is this first button that we created up here. We're saying that we're going to stack them vertically, so this is true, and the offset is going to be minus 25 pixels, so 25 pixels down. If there's a problem here, we're just going to go in, create an error message, and we also need to delete P button because P button has not been saved, so it won't be cleaned up. We need to clean that up ourselves. Then what we do is we assign this radio button into our control stack, and here we're going to specify menu because that's what we're using. So now this will make absolutely no difference from what we showed before. Let's just test it out. We have our button, we can highlight it, but notice that we cannot actually click on this and toggle it. It won't let us toggle because we only have one button inside of our list, so you cannot unselect only one item because one item in a radio list always has to be selected. So there is a difference, I guess, but to see the difference a little more clearly, let's go in and add some extra buttons into this list so we have something to toggle between. Right after we push our radio button onto our control stack, we're going to go in and create another button. This other button, we're going to call it button 1024 by 768. We're going to be using these ones later. The ID numbers are not that important. We have similar kind of parameters being passed into here, and if this guy fails, then, well, we generate an error message, but if it succeeds, we go in and assign textures, and after assigning textures, we can then call pradio add button, and we specify we want to add this new button into the stack. Now let's take a look to see what happens. We have two choices within our radio stack. We have this one and we have this one. By default, the first one's always selected. We can go in and select the second one, and notice that the first one becomes unselected. So we can select this guy and we'll toggle back. If we select the one that's already selected, nothing happens, so we don't actually toggle between these two states. We're just always selecting the one that we want to highlight over top of. We can go in and add a third button in the same manner. What we're going to do is create another P button, and if everything's fine here, we're going to assign the textures, and then we're going to add another button to the end. Now we should have three buttons that we can radio between. And there we go. We have the first one selected, second, and then third one. And you can see now we can toggle between any of these that we wish. By using the constructor for the radio set, which is over here, we can change this to be false, and as soon as we do this, then our buttons are going to be stacked horizontally. All the calculations are done for us automatically, so all the spacing should still be correct. So we now see we have this is the first one, and we're moving minus 25 pixel units to the left, minus 25 to this side here. So the first one is located here, second, third. If we didn't want to stack them that way, we can change the offset, make it positive, or make it even larger than 25. Let's say we make it 30. And when we run it now, we can see that the selected one will be the far left one, and then we have buttons going to the right. So this is now 1, this is 2, and this is 3. Okay? So that's the way we go about to use a radio button and a radio grouping. We always have to create the button first, and then we go in and add it to an existing radio group, which will just tack it on to the end. By using the existing functions, it automatically toggles between them for us, selecting the one that we're over top of and unselecting the ones that we do not select.